Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Say What, the podcast to protect our kids, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system, including woke indoctrination through curriculums that center around things like sex and gender theory, critical race theory, and something called social emotional learning, what we at POK call the triple threat. It's in part because of these threats that increasing numbers of parents have made the decision to remove their children from the influence of the public schools for alternatives like homeschooling. Homeschooling in the United States has experienced serious growth over the last 2 decades. In fact, in 1999, homeschoolers represented approximately 1.7% of the K through 12 population. But today that percentage is close to 7% and rising. And to help bring light to this subject and others, I'm very privileged today to be joined by Sam Sorbo. As an education freedom advocate, Sam's mission is to help parents and their children emancipate from our public school system. A successful Hollywood film actress, writer, and producer, she stepped back from her own career to immerse herself in the home education of her 3 young children for over a decade. Recognizing the shortcomings of institutional education led Sam to understand that there is much more to education than merely academics. Having recently graduated her 3rd and last child, Sam now has had the opportunity to look in the rearview mirror and reflect on her years of dedication to their education and to help bring her insights to a broader audience. As a prolific author, podcast host, and public speaker, Sam has dedicated her time to teaching families, in her words, educate differently. A fun fact about Sam is that she started adult life at Duke, majoring in biomedical engineering. So she's a bit of a polymath. And I would certainly be remiss if I didn't also mention the fact that Sam happens to be married to the actor and producer, Kevin Sorbo, known to many in our audience for his performance in the 2014 film, God's Not Dead, among many others. Welcome to Say What, Sam Sorbo.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What a lovely introduction.
Well, it's so great to have you. And a little side note before we begin, Sam, I'm fairly certain that I glimpsed your husband at the art conference in London this past February. I take it you were there as well?
Yes, we were both there.
Oh, fantastic.
And somehow we missed each other in the throngs of people who were there. It was so big this year. But wasn't it great? Did you have a good time?
It was fantastic. My wife and I attended. This was the first time that we had been there. And I obviously didn't know what to expect. But like you, I was astonished by the numbers of the people that were there. I hear the audience was about 4,000, which is amazing. And for those who are not acquainted with ARC, I'm curious, how would you describe it?
So ARC is called the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. It is an effort to strengthen people through relationships, introductions, and coalitions working together. People who understand the roots of our Western culture and how valuable it is. And so to that end, there's a whole contingent that understands that our roots are Christian in nature, but there's also a contingent that is arguing that we don't have to get all religious on people. We can just tell them that, the traditions are good and we should preserve them and stuff. So they're having a little bit of their growing pains, but I was really heartened to see 4,000 people there. I went to the first one, the first large one that was about 1,500 people. And they really managed to put together an amazing event for that many people because, of course, they had to serve lunch every day and breakfast every day and stuff like that. And they really did a great job. But if people go on to YouTube, you can look up some of the videos of some of the presenters. It's ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, and you can see some of the presentations. Erica Komisar made a fabulous presentation last year. She was there this year also, or 2 years ago, whatever. And she was there this year also. And so she runs a school in London, in the inner city London. It's kind of like a charter school. She does not get to choose her students. They are all of families with very poor means. And she has instituted in her school a non-diversity policy. So even though they come from varying backgrounds, they all eat the same food, which means that because she has students who are vegetarian, everybody in school eats vegetarian meals every day. They eat communally like a family. They have discussions at the tables at lunchtime like a family. And so what she's managed to do, because I had a chance to interview her, is basically reinstate, in a sense, reconstitute for children a family environment. And because it's a family environment, it speaks to the character of the child. Because they wear uniforms and the uniforms have to look impeccable, and everybody is engaged in sort of correcting each other so that they all keep up that standard, she's engaged in character. And this is what I'm trying to tell people. You can't teach academics devoid of character, because the child won't want to learn the academics. The only reason that the child is driven to learn the academics really is because he understands that those things that seem tedious are bettering me and my character. And I want to be better. I want to be aiming at something. I want to go for something. And I need the academics to get me there. And she's done a remarkable job. They have really astonishing outcomes at that school.
Yeah, I had the pleasure to listening to her at a sidebar meeting speak. Just an absolutely remarkable woman. My own take on the ARC convention was it's when people ask me, I point out, well, you've heard of the World Economic Forum that happens in Davos, Switzerland every year. This is sort of the conservative counterpoint or foil to that. At least I hope it turns into that. It was one of the most remarkable assemblages of bright minds and conservative thinkers worldwide that came together in common cause to pursue responsible citizenship, as you so eloquently pointed out. So I hope for very good things in the future for ARC. And like you, I would strongly encourage our listeners to go to their website and listen to some of the presentations. There's a lot worthwhile there. So Sam, I guess an obvious question is, what caused you to leave what many would consider an exciting and obviously comfortable life to personally homeschool your children and to become a vocal advocate for educational freedom?
It's actually, I guess that's a reasonable question. I didn't really question it at the time. I love my kids. My son, my oldest, he went to first and second grade in the cute little public school that we moved to because it was such a great little school. You know, the district was really highly regarded and whatever. I didn't think they were educating him. I don't know exactly what I would have identified as good education, but, I dealt with things like, oh, I put your son next to the very misbehaved child to see if he would have a good influence on him. And he did. And of course, I'm thinking, well, what influence did that child have on my child, that misbehaved child, right? Yeah. And things like that. Things like we would turn in book reports. We turned in 5 of them, one every month. And I never got any grading back. I never saw any results. So one day I asked the teacher, how are his book reports? And she, without missing a beat, she goes, oh, not very good. And I was like, well, why did you? And here's the thing. I was very active in the classroom. I was there at least once a week helping her clean up after school. At least once a week, I was in the classroom either teaching art or walking the kids to the library. I mean, I was very involved. And so I would converse with her more than once a week. And I never heard anything until I asked in February. And that was his second grade year. And so when she said that to me, I was like, okay, show me a book report that you think is good. Like, show me what we're aiming at. And she showed me one that was all completed in cursive handwriting, wall-to-wall writing, which now, in hindsight, I know the parent did. At the time, I was completely mortified. I thought, oh, my goodness, I've just dropped the ball. Shame on you. I was completely chastised. And so I started doing book report with my son after school every day. And, with my finger out, leaning over him at the kitchen counter. And I realized, my gosh, I'm homeschooling. I'm just doing it at the end of the day when we're both tired and cranky and hungry. And I don't even like what they're calling book report. I'm not happy about this particular form that he's filling in, where I have to say, don't just copy the sentence. You have to make up a new sentence in your own words that says what that paragraph says, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I just said to my husband, I think I could fail at homeschooling him and he'll still be better off. And I said that because he was coming home with attitude. School engenders a kind of ageism. And so, and my son was exceedingly popular. And so like in first grade, all the fifth graders knew his name because he got to know everybody and he was very friendly, very outgoing. And so he would come home and sort of lord it over his, stupid younger siblings. And I didn't like that. And I didn't like the influence that those misbehaved children were having on him and et cetera. And so I just said, I think I'll try it. And if I fail, probably no harm, no foul, but he'll probably still be better off. And so we started. I absolutely loved it. I love my children. I miss them. They're grown. Like I miss them when they were little because they were so adorable and wonderful. And
it goes by so quickly.
And teaching them was so much fun. I'm sorry?
It goes by so quickly.
It does. And so we started. I'd love to say that I never looked back, but that would be a lie. A year and a half later, I felt like a failure. And the reason that I felt like a failure was because I was taught to feel like a failure in school. We're all taught to feel like failures in school. We're all taught to feel like we are incapable of doing anything that we haven't been formally instructed in. Well, I was never taught to teach children, so I didn't know how to teach children. So clearly I was failing at it. And I was failing so badly that my second born was just not a good reader. He was not fluent, second grade, really couldn't piece together the words on the page very well. And so we did reading lessons every day over Christmas, twice a day. I was a slave driver because he was letting me down and I was letting myself down. And darn it, I was going to make sure that he could read well and whatever. And I still felt like a failure. And so I enrolled him in a private little Christian school, lovely little school. I went to the headmistress and I said, okay, so my son he's advanced in math because Shane loved math. He just absolutely adored math. So in first grade, he would say to me, Mommy, I'm going to do 30 pages of math today. And I would say, okay, get started. Off you go. So he finished first grade math on Halloween, which is the end of October. So by by second grade, he was in fourth grade math and just humming along. But I said to her, he's not a good reader. So he's remedial in reading. And I did the best I could. And so she took him off to test him. And she came back and she said, well, he's second grade. I said, yeah. She said, well, he is doing math at a fourth grade level. So you were right about that. She goes, but he is reading at a fifth grade level. And I said, so I'm the one with the problem? And she goes, well, yeah, kind of. And I left him there. Despite proving that I was more than capable, I still left him in the school for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, I was just fed up. It was a hybrid program. Hybrid programs typically are not terribly successful, partly because the parents don't do the work because they know that the school's going to have to make it up anyway. It was not successful for us because they did not have a good delivery system for the homework. And so I would be not able to get the homework. And so I'd call the teacher. I'd say, I can't get the homework. And she'd say, well, then don't worry about it. And I was like, no. You're dealing with like whatever that personality type is that I have to dot all my I's and cross all my T's. And if you give me an assignment, it will be done. And so after 6 weeks, I pulled the boys out. I asked them if they were happy. And they were like, no, Mommy, we don't like it. Second grade and fourth grade. And I said, well, then we're going to quit. We're going to stop doing that, and we'll go back to doing it at home. And then I never looked back.
Well, I was going to
And
ask you
so,
if you ever did consider private school, and obviously you did for a very brief time, but then you decided to pull the trigger and go full time into homeschooling.
yeah, well, I discovered a lot. So in that instance, I discovered that the teachers that the private schools hire are just like the teachers in the public schools. They went to teaching college, and they are classroom behavior management people. They are not the thing that we all think we should think about when we think teacher. And they're not necessarily any good. They might be great. It's Russian roulette, but more than that. So my math proficient son did 6 weeks in the school. When he came home that Monday, I put the math book in front of him where I knew he was, because we were hybrid homeschool. So I put the page in front of him. I said, let's try to do this one. And he said, no, mommy, no, I can't do it. It's too hard. And it broke my heart because he's my math whiz. And frankly, that's our connection. Like, I love math and he loved math. That was so cool, right? And I took the book away because he was clearly traumatized. And I never got to the bottom of that. But I will tell you that the one thing that school did was it put him back on a treadmill. So he had to work at the same pace as the rest of the class, which I've already shown was not really successful for him. He wanted to work at his own pace. And so there are a lot of things that happen in the institution that are not appropriate for children. So that's why I say that school's not good for children.
Well, yeah, you say that children need to be emancipated, your words, from the modern school system. Can you flesh that out a little bit? What are your specific concerns about what you call the modern school system?
So emancipation is to free you from a system of slavery or enslavement. I call it a system of enslavement because so many parents come to me and say, I could never homeschool. I can't do it. So they've been enslaved. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they think they can't do it. That's slavery. We learn certain things in school. We learn not to ask questions. You think you go to school to learn, but you actually go to school to not learn, because the first thing that they teach you to do is you have to raise your hand. You must ask permission before you're allowed to learn something that you want to know. So the raising your hand to ask a question, it's behavior management, okay, and it's necessary for classroom management, fine. I never forced my kids to raise their hands at home. So that's a you problem. I say to the school, that's not a me problem. But when you create that barrier of entry to your child for learning, because what happens? The child raises his hand. He doesn't want to raise his hand. It draws attention to him. It makes him look like the stupid one. I'm the one with the question. Nobody else has a question, right? And then not only that, teacher's just as likely to turn him down as she is to answer his question. You know what? I'm talking about this right now. We're not going to talk about that thing that you want to talk about. We're talking about this thing that I want to talk about. So it sets up this anti-learning sort of mentality in the school. I call it the don't ask. So when we just went through COVID, did you notice how many people were not asking any questions? Don't question. Don't ask. Trust the expert. That's the other paradigm that we inherit from our schools. Teacher knows everything. She'll let you know. Don't ask. In her good time, she will teach you what you need to know. So you sit there and shut up like a good little birdie that's about to be force fed by the bird mama, And there's also don't try, because in school, the school paradigm is failure is very bad. In the real world, failure is not that bad. Failure is the stepping stone to success. But in the school world, failure's bad. So don't try. Don't read. Teacher read the book. She's going to tell you what's in the book because that's her job. Her job is to tell you what's in the book. So you don't have to read. So now we have a whole number of Christians who never read their Bibles because pastor read the Bible. He'll tell me what's in it every Sunday when I go to church, if I go to church, right? And then don't think. That's the last one. Don't think, because the teacher only wants you to put on the test what the teacher told you to put on the test. That's why the number one question in schools today is, will this be on the test? because I don't want to have to learn something that I don't need. And the children know they basically don't need any of this stuff because no one's made the case to them for why all of the stuff that they're learning is necessary, and much of it is not necessary. And the necessary things are not taught. The government controls the schools. I'm talking public school, obviously. The government controls the schools and does not teach the citizens their role as citizens. We have people graduating who don't understand rule of law. We have people graduating who never learned how to pay their taxes. That you would think, government, you want me to pay my taxes. You would think the government would offer to train us how to pay our taxes or how to follow the rule of law or how laws are made. They don't even teach civics anymore. The whole thing is upside down. And, school was invented to impart morality into the younger generation because we understood that this Constitution would serve only a moral population. And so it used to be one-room schoolhouse. It was communal. The townsfolk, the parents in the town would get together. They would find a teacher to hire for the one-room schoolhouse, and the children did copy work out of the Bible. So they would learn how to read and write at the same time as they're learning morality. And the parents would pay the teacher maybe by the month, maybe at the end of the week, maybe in eggs, maybe with a chicken. But it was every parent had the responsibility to educate their child. And they recognized that, hey, bringing a teacher in so that my child can focus on really getting down the correct spelling of words or whatever, that actually makes a lot of sense. But then it was all hijacked and we allowed it to happen. And we allowed it to happen initially when they turned the schools into factory schools. We allowed then that women should go back to work because they don't need to be home. The kids are at school all day. That's the destruction of the family right there. And then they said, well, you know what? School or education is purely academic. There's no character development in education. That's ridiculous. It's only academic. Get your Bibles out of the school. We don't need any religion in the school. Well, you and I both know they didn't take religion out of the school. They replaced one religion with a different religion. And so now, instead of academics, because they can't accomplish the academics without proper character formation, and so they're not, instead of academics, they're teaching doctrine, which you open the show with. LGBTQ doctrine, critical race theory doctrine, DEI doctrine. All of that is the new doctrine that's in the schools. I mean, it's been there for a while. It was fighting with the Christian doctrine for a long time. And now it's fully enveloped the schools to the point that, Oregon, you don't need to read or do math to graduate high school because it's not academics. And in the state of New Jersey, teachers don't have to pass basic competency tests to become teachers because they're not teaching academics.
And even children don't have to pass certain tests to go on to the next grade level because they just pass them on. It's interesting that most parents don't realize that in America, really up until the 1830s and 1840s with people like Horace Mann, and then later in the 1950s with John Dewey, virtually all education was more or less privatized in the country. And we produced generation after generation of the most knowledgeable and equipped for practical life in the country of any nation on earth. Today, the U.S. spends more per student than virtually every industrialized country on the earth. And yet our academic performance, when compared to other nations, which spend far less per student than we do, continue to fall behind. So not only are we indoctrinating them with a worldview that is in complete opposition to what this nation was founded upon, we're not teaching them the basic academics, the ABCs. And you discovered this, obviously, in your experience with your young children. And Sam, I want to ask you, you're obviously a very busy author, and you've written many books, and they all have, I think, a fairly consistent theme. I'll just mention a few of them here. One of your books is entitled, They're Your Kids. The Inspiration Journey from Self-Doubter to Home Advocate. Or another book, Teach from Love, a school year devotional for families. And I think it's your latest book, A Parent's Guide to Homeschool, Making Education Easy and Fun. And in this latest book, you address a lot of common concerns about homeschooling, how to get involved with it. People looking at it from afar thinking, oh, I could never do this. It's just too much. That's really not an option for me. And as a veteran homeschooling dad myself, I'd like to talk a little bit more about this. Can you help debunk some of the common misperceptions about the homeschooling experience? What are those misperceptions in your own mind?
Well, I'll start with a little story. When my daughter was 11, I realized that she was an artist. Now, my first child wanted to be an actor. I'm an actor. I can teach that. My second child, kind of a mathematician, engineer, went to school for engineering. I did. So I can teach that, and I can get him into, some engineering school when the time is right, because I know how to navigate those waters. But an artist, I had no idea what to do for her. And I was the teacher, because that's the paradigm that we've inherited from our schools, right? And by the way, we are last in academic performance among developed nations. We're 40th among 40, and we spend the most. So, the metrics are just ridiculous at this point. In any case, she was about 11, and somebody said to me, well, get her, artists need to know anatomy, so maybe get her anatomy classes. And I was like, well, that would be great. I'll find her an anatomy class, because then I will have delegated my role as teacher. I will have found her a teacher, and then she will be able to learn, because that's the paradigm. Teacher teaches, student learns from the teacher, right? Wrong. So I ran up to her room and I said, anatomy class. And she said, oh, mommy, like with that little bless your heart that only an 11-year-old can really do effectively. And she showed me her sketchbook. And she showed me a double-page spread of drawings of the interior workings of the human knee in various positions, some of them labeled. And I said, you're yourself anatomy? And she said, well, yes, mommy. If I want to be an artist, I have to know anatomy. And so my point is that it was that in that moment that I realized we are our own teachers. And the school impedes that, distracts from that, and forces us to do things that we don't really want to do, making it all kind of awful. But when I started teaching my kids, and now I'll put that in air quotes, but I was the teacher, right? I started learning history, and I was like, this stuff is awesome. Now I read historical books. I read biographies and historical fiction and all of that stuff, because now I love it. But school is an impediment to learning. It's anti-child. I'm speaking quite generally. So I'm not going to drill down into every single school. There are some schools that have implemented new paradigms, new pedagogies that are more effective. But when you make learning so onerous, which is what the schools do, and they can't help it, it's in the system. It's a factory model. They move at the sound of a bell. It's just awful. When you do that to children, you're distracting them from the things that really interest them, which is a terrible thing to do, because children are endowed with innate curiosity. And that curiosity should be something that's cultivated, not shut down because teacher wants to talk about this right now. Does that make sense?
Totally. I'm wondering, what would you say to the parent who maybe have considered homeschool in the past, but then they look at their own academic credentials and they say, I have no business teaching. I didn't do well in school that myself. I'm not college educated. I would not even know where to begin, let alone take on the onerous responsibility of educating children to be productive citizens in a very complex world. What would you say to that parent?
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier, a little bit earlier, that we used to educate the greatest minds in this nation. They went to school and they were educated, and now we don't have that anymore, right? But really, the greatest minds that we've produced were the revolutionary minds that never attended school. So I'd love for parents to think about that. And those children who grew up to be our signers of our Declaration of Independence and the creators of probably the greatest political document known to mankind at this point, they were self-taught. And their parents didn't go to school. Their parents had no education, by and large. And the metrics that we have from studies are that homeschooled children score between, I think it's 18 and 25% better on standardized tests, better than government educated children across the board. For inner city students, they score up to 42% better than their peers. Now, their parents aren't any better educated. In fact, these metrics have absolutely no correlation with the level of education of the parent. So we used to do speech and debate competitions, and I would try to recruit judges, and parents would say to me, "Oh, I can't judge. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to judge." And I would say to them, there's a form you fill out. You write down your reaction to what the speaker says. He's giving his speech. You just give your reaction. If you have no education in what he's talking about, that's perfect. The last thing you want to be is like the expert in the field, because then you're not going to give a good critique of how good his speech was. We need people who are novices. And the same goes for home educators. If you don't know the answer to the question, that is better for the child, because your job is not to give answers to your child. Your job is to show the child how to learn. And so if he puts you in the position of needing to learn something so that you can explain it to him, that's great, because you're then going to show him how to learn it. And then maybe he'll learn it faster than you and he can explain it back to you.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
We have the whole the problem is we have the whole thing skewed because we all went to school. So we have this false paradigm that's embedded in us because they had us for 16,000 hours of K through 12 schooling. And it's the wrong paradigm. It's a failed paradigm. And we see that today. And so we're busy trying to scramble and figure out how to fix the schools, how to save the schools, when they're doing exactly what they were designed to do. It just took them this long to get to this point. And, do you understand that Maryland is arguing in front of the Supreme Court for the school's right to train second graders and kindergartners in LGBTQ pride stuff? Terms like lubrication and seeing naked people walking at a pride parade in one of the children's coloring books or cartoon books. We have a state that's arguing that that is necessary. And the parents are saying, wait a minute, we don't think it's necessary. Please don't do that. Instead of saying, you guys are perverts. Get your dirty, filthy hands off of my children. I will never submit my children back into that school again. That's what parents need to be doing today. And that's what your organization talks about, right? Protect our kids. We're not protecting anybody. We're still submitting them to this nasty beast that seeks to enslave them. And for a long time, it sought to enslave them, just their minds, just to get their minds to think they were incapable, and it succeeded. And so now you have all these parents who think, I'm not capable. I can't stand up to the bully because I was trained not to stand up to the bully, because that's what the schools train. And now they've got the little kids and they want to have sex with the little kids. So what do? They pervert them. And the parents stand by because, what am I going to say? I don't know what to do. I never went to school for that. I never was taught how to protest, how to speak at a school board meeting, how to write an amicus brief for a Supreme Court case. Nobody ever taught me how to do that, so I don't know. So I'm completely disabled by my schooling, by the way. So I'm just here to empower parents. You are more than capable. God gave you your children for a reason, and he told you your job is to educate them. He didn't say go find a school for them. He said, teach them my words, teach them diligently. When you walk by the by, when you wake up in the morning, when you lie down to sleep, teach them my words. And by the way, he factored in your stupidity because he knows. So you can mess it up. You can. It's true. But you can't mess it up as badly as they're going to try to mess it up. And they will succeed.
You probably experienced the same thing we did when we were homeschooling our kids, and you were part of a broader community of homeschoolers. And we'll get to the socialization issue in just a minute. But I must say my own personal experience, and it is anecdotal, but of hundreds and hundreds of homeschool parents that we met, they did not have anywhere near, the formal education to take on the task that they collectively took on to educate their children, K through 12.
Right, but they did it anyway.
But they did it anyway. They learned what they were lacking. And to your point, their children also performed anywhere to 20 to 30 percentage points better on ACT and SET testing in high school than their public school peers. So the message is, you can do it. It's more about will and dedication than having formal training. It's certainly possible. But another question, Sam, and this is one that comes up very often, is balancing sacrifices and priorities. Many parents make the argument, I'm a single mother, or I'm a single father, or both of us, we may be married, we live in a nuclear family, we're blessed by that, but we both have to work just to make ends meet. And we can't afford to take the time to homeschool our children. We just can't see a way to do this. What would your answer be to those kinds of concerns?
So the first thing I ask those parents is, how much time do you think it takes? Because it takes about an hour of your time a day. And if you don't have an hour to devote to your children a day, you shouldn't have had kids. Secondly, I know single parents who are homeschooling their kids and working full time because it only takes about an hour a day. Now, if you have little kids, you do need childcare. That's a different matter. You don't need a teacher for childcare. You need somebody to help you with childcare. I'm trying to change the attitude in the nation to empower parents to bring their kids to work. Elon Musk just brought his kids to work. He just does it. He gets derided for it for some reason, but the guy lost a kid to the woke mob already. And so now he's bringing his kids with him and he's traveling to India. That's homeschooling. He's bringing his kid because he has kids of Indian descent. He brought them to India to meet the Prime Minister of India. And that's homeschooling. People who think they can't homeschool have no idea what homeschooling is because they think it's school and it has to be at home. That's not what it is. And that's why in my book, Parents Guide to Homeschool, what I do is I reset the table. I reset the definition of what we're actually talking about. Because when you ask parents, what are you hoping your child gets from going to school? They will say an education. Great. And are children getting an education in school? No. Okay. So then how do we get our children an education? Now let's break that apart. What do you mean education? What is it that you want for your child? What is the end goal that you're looking for? And the end goal should be something along the lines of a well-rounded human being who knows how to forgive and ask for forgiveness, who knows how to contribute to society and support themselves and support a family or raise a family, be a good person. I want my grandkids around me. That's like a big thing for me. So I kept my kids close. I actually tried to get them to study abroad, but they didn't want to go. Now I have one that's traveling abroad, which is hard, but good, like good for him and hard for me, and, buck up and deal with it. So reframe your goals, because the schools today are college prep and career readiness. And college prep and career readiness is the argument that money is the highest value. Everything you do must serve money. And so you will sacrifice everything for money. And we should have a conversation about sacrifice, because in our schools, we are taught that sacrifice means the giving up of something. But that's not what sacrifice means. You never just give up something. That's not sacrifice. you give up something for something better. So we ought to be thinking of sacrifice as a positive, like, where can I sacrifice today? Because that means I'm getting something better than whatever I'm giving up. So what can I give up to get something better? And that's what we ought to be doing with our kids. So you might have to give up bowling night for your kids. But I guarantee your kids are better than bowling night in the long run. Right? It's a different way of thinking about it. And then when you step back and you go, okay, so if I want my kid to understand how to be a good human being, well, we got to read the Bible every day. Well, I'll tell you, you read the Bible every day for 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, maybe a little bit more. Get an annotated version so you can understand it, look up answers to questions and stuff. It becomes like a hide and seek. It becomes like this. It was incredible. It was just an incredible thing that I started doing because I had to give up our community Bible study, which was once a week. So I said, okay, we're going to do the Bible every day and we'll just read a little bit. And the kids took turns reading and they got better at reading out loud and stuff like that. And man, that just put them on a quest for truth. When you put your child on a quest for truth, because that's his innate curiosity is to know God and discover who God is, which is expressed in everything around us, then you've got a well-rounded human being who can learn anything for the rest of his life. And he won't be trained for the jobs that don't exist anymore, which is what the schools do. They do job training for jobs that don't exist. And they promise career readiness and they deliver incompetency from our schools, from our colleges, right? We got to step away from that entire paradigm. None of that is good. That's why I really struggle with school choice, because we're pushing kids into other schools, like instead of homeschooling. Homeschooling's the only way. And I know not everybody will homeschool. So yes, I've got some initiatives to improve our schools, but we have to be very careful about how much we're pushing a failed paradigm. I get it. Some kids, their parents can't do it. They won't do it. They refuse to sacrifice, you name it, all of the different excuses. I get it. And there's a way to improve the schools to a certain degree, but they will never beat homeschooling. School will never beat homeschooling. It can't. It can't. And by the way, all of the ancillary benefits of homeschooling. So I schooled my boys, then I figured it out a little bit better with my daughter. And so they are academics. My daughter's also an academic because she loves God. And so she loves learning stuff, and she's constantly reading history and constantly reading art history and all of that stuff. But the fact that I schooled them for an hour every morning, or, a little bit more as they got older, sure, yeah. But they had the rest of the day free. So they set their sights on other things and they taught themselves other things. And that's what we want for our kids. We want our kids to be happy. And it's not, yes, there are some kids who just want to go to law school, but I got to tell you, you don't have to go to college to go to law school. Like, there are all these rules that we've, you don't have to graduate high school to go to college. You don't have to graduate college to get a diploma or get a college degree to go to law school. If you pass the LSATs without going to college, I think any law school worth their salt would take you as a student. Although nowadays, did you see the story about the young guy who in high school developed an app that's making $30 million a year? And he applied to like 12 schools and only 3 of them accepted him?
I did.
Like, I mean, who wants college anymore? Please. You better understand fully why you're going to college. Not, oh, what college am I going to go to? You better understand why. And then, we've been conditioned. And there's another thing. We've been brainwashed by the schools. That's why I call it an emancipation project. We've been brainwashed to go to college because everything's about college prep and career readiness. You got to go to college. Everybody goes to college. That's the only way to get, blah, blah, blah. And then we're seeing now college is not at all what it was cracked up to be. The college tuition rates have risen, I think, 7 times inflation over the past 30, 40 years, something like that. It's absurd. And by the way, the salaries of professors have not grown that much. So somebody else is making a lot of buck. It's a grift. It's a grift. And we're too conditioned by our own schooling to recognize it.
Sam, what about one of the key concerns of parents when they're considering homeschool? And I think very often it's just a canard. They use it as an excuse to say, well, this is why homeschooling would not be good for my child. And of course, I'm talking about the socialization concern. If I cordon my child off from society and from other children their same age and for a larger community of adults, then they're going to be sequestered within the four walls of my home, and they won't know how to deal in the real world. They won't, they're just going to be curtailed in their human development, because the only thing they're really going to know is just the four walls of this house, our immediate family, and maybe a few friends here and there that are also part of the homeschooling community. And I can't have that. Society needs to concern itself with preparing, the coming generations to actually be able to operate in a complex society. What is your answer to the parent that's concerned about, quote, socialization?
I'm sorry. It's so ridiculous. It's a conditioned response. You're a slave, man. You're a mental slave if you come at me with that. So you have no friends? Like, your child will never see anybody ever again if you decide to homeschool him? You're never going to take him to karate? You're never going to, take him to a basketball game? He's not allowed to leave the house ever? What kind of parent are you? Like, that's absurd. The idea that we believe that children are socialized in school is so absurd. The only reason, let me say this, the only reason that we believe children are socialized in school is that's the only opportunity we give them. But homeschoolers are much better socialized on average. Now, that didn't used to be the case, because it used to be there were so few homeschoolers. The people who homeschooled were the real misfits, the kids who couldn't get along, the kids who were so bullied in school or just so misfit and had no social skills. And so it was just torture for them to be immersed in a vat of other children every day. And so their parents brought them home and homeschooled them. And so they were weird. Like, those used to be the weirdos. And it's true. And so they gave homeschoolers like a bad rap. But these days, come on, these kids, the reason that I started homeschooling my son, maybe not first and foremost, but certainly secondarily, was I didn't like the social things that he was coming home with. That was part of the reason that I started homeschooling him. I was like, well, he'll still be better off. Even if he doesn't get the academics as well, he'll still be better off. He'll still be a better person because of all the crud that goes on in the schools. And do you know, I just looked this up. I think it's close to 90% of students have felt bullied by a teacher. So, bullying is rampant in our schools. Well, of course it is, because we teach bullying. We train children to be bullies. We tell them survival of the fittest is the law of the land. That's bullying. So it's no wonder that we have rampant bullying in our schools. And then we lie about it. So when I was on the air, I used to do radio years ago, and I was covering it real time. There was a young girl in middle school who was beaten to death in the girls' bathroom by two other girls over a boy. She expired. She died. And within an hour, the superintendent of schools in Baltimore had come out and announced blatantly, our schools are safe. And I'm literally on the air going, well, all evidence to the contrary, you have a dead child on your hands. And by the way, not so good for the two bullies either, who now know that they managed to kill a girl. Like, your schools are absolutely not safe. You are corrupting young minds. And there's no evidence that they're not. So that's socialization. Is that what we're talking about? Is that what you want for your child?
Yeah, my answer to parents is, who would you rather them be socialized from? A peer group of kids their same age, who very often come from troubled backgrounds and homes, where, for 8 hours, 5 days a week, this is who they're primarily being socialized from, or loving adults and other families who are getting together in common cause to teach their children true values and good character. You make the choice. this is a canard that's been going on for decades. I think it's been largely dealt with, but it still comes up every now and then.
I don't know. I keep getting asked.
Yeah.
So I don't
It has
know.
to be
There are a lot
answered.
of people who still think that children can teach other children to be social.
Right. That's right.
Like,
And we've seen the result of that. Now,
you need a teacher, by the way. You need a teacher for everything else. But social skills, that's learned by, from peers.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah, that's right. Sam, one more question before we're going to have to wrap up here. What about different learning styles? You briefly mentioned that. I mean, obviously, all kids are different, your children included. How did you deal with that in fashioning curriculums and responding to their differences, their genetic makeup? You may have one child who's good at math and another child who's terrible at it, another child who's great in the arts and humanities, and the other child could care less about that. And of course, as a teaching parent, you need to be able to accommodate all these different learning styles. How do you approach that in your book?
Yeah, in the book, I go through and I name many of the learning styles so that at least we are aware. Hey, maybe your kid is not going to respond to whatever you decide is the best way to teach him. Maybe he's not going to respond very well to that. And maybe you need to rethink how you're teaching him so that so if you have a kinetic learner, maybe getting a little mini trampoline so he can jump up and down while he's, doing his math facts or whatever is the way to go. I was not very adept at it. I admit, like when I first started with my kids, I was very focused on getting the data entry done because I went to school and I learned that academics are data entry and that's what education is. But of course, that's wrong. That's just dead wrong. And so the idea is if your goal is to empower your child to be his best teacher, to teach himself, then it's a joint effort, it's a partnership, and you figure it out together. And so if your kid says, I need to I remember my daughter used to sweat. Not sweat, but she would just get very upset, very sort of hot and bothered while we were trying to learn reading. And so I would just have to accommodate that. I'd say, well, you know what, get up, take a walk around, go outside, catch a breeze a little bit, and then come back and we'll do some more. And so you just accommodate your kids because you love them. It's not really rocket science. And this is what we've codified everything. We've just institutionalized it all to such a degree that we've lost the beauty of what learning can be, I think. And so I go into it a little bit in the book, well, maybe a little bit more than a little bit, but I also want parents to feel free. You'll discover other things that it might not be discovered yet, how your child learns best. When I got to a certain point with my daughter, and we were really struggling with math. My language did not work for her. And I tutored calculus and math. And so I understood that not every math teacher could teach every student. And I did have a facility for figuring out what it was that would click in the student's head. But I couldn't do it for my daughter, which was like crazy to me. And so I said to her in 10th grade, I said, you know what? I don't think trigonometry is that important for us to get riled up and have this kind of a struggle. And that year I was teaching her 10th grade class with other students in her class. We did a co-op one day a week with other students. And so I taught them math, like we did the math, but I just gave her the year off. I said, you know what, if you want to do a math lesson a week, I'm fine with that. I don't need to see it. You're on your own. We can take a year off from math because she stressed about a lot and I didn't need the math to be more of that because it's not that important. I know the school says it's important, but look where the schools are today. They know nothing. They're a disaster. And so we took the year off. And in the summer, she said, Mom, I'm going to go learn math. I found a website that teaches it and it seems to be in a way that I can understand it better. And so I'm just going to do it myself because she's curious, because she wants to know. If you can engage the curiosity of the child, they will be set for life. But if you kill that by institutionalizing them and making learning onerous, you hamstring them, you enslave them.
I could not agree more. This has been such a valuable conversation, and we could go on literally for hours talking about this. But for the sake of time, I really want to encourage our listeners. If you haven't already, please take advantage of Sam Sorbo's work in this area in homeschooling. Get her book, Parents' Guide to Homeschool, Making Education Easy and Fun. And if you take the time to read this book, I promise you, you will be richly rewarded. Sam, I also know that you run a nonprofit. I believe it's
called They're Your Kids. It's named after my first book.
Okay.
And our first initiative is a coalition against government overreach because, as I said before, school will never beat homeschooling. And what we're seeing now in our legislatures are encroachments on parental rights because the government thinks that it knows better than the parents how to educate and how to care even for children. And so we have overreaches in CPS where, this family in Massachusetts decided that their 9-month-old wasn't quite old enough for the shot.
Yeah.
Doctor turned them in. CPS knocked on the door, wanted to take the children. They fled to Texas. Texas extradited them back to the state of Massachusetts. The children are not allowed to see their parents, all because the parents just decided 9 months is too early for that shot. We've got that. We've got in the state of Illinois, we've got HB 2728 that says, if you want to homeschool, you need to have a college degree. No, you don't. But the state decided that they wanted to do that to homeschoolers to make it more onerous, to make it more difficult for parents to homeschool their children, because in the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago, they have 0 students in public school reading at proficiency. And by the way, I want parents to understand, when we say proficiency, we mean a 70% test score, right? Like above a B or above a C at least, let's say. When they say proficiency, they mean anything above 36%. So I want you to understand they've changed the definition of words. They've changed the definition of education. They've changed everything. This has been a tremendous sleight of hand. And unfortunately, because it's generational, we're suffering the consequences now from generations gone by. And so that's why time's a wasting. We have to act now. So if you want more information about KAGO, the Coalition Against Government Overreach, I will be collecting signatures. The website is almost up and running. Everybody can go to sorbostudios.com. And that's where my books are also. And if you sign up for the newsletter, we love to stay in touch with the newsletter because it just gives us a little bit more leeway. Social media has been somewhat hostile. And so even though we're all on social media, we do the newsletter as well. So, and it's free. So just sign up and join us in this effort to reinstate the family for the fabric of our culture.
That's probably a great place to leave it. But before we sign off, Sam, what's next for you? And how can people keep track of what you're doing?
Well, in a week or so, I'm going to speak to a bunch of Christian legislators. So I'm excited about that. I'm emceeing their national event. I've got a movie in the works. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. I'm working on a new book. It's called Rooted for Life. It's short. I haven't decided if I want to make it full length or just a short book. And so I've got a little bit going on, but really it's just all missional. I just want the family to be recognized as an important part of our fabric, and particularly fathers. We have really done a terrible disservice to men in general with what we did to children in school. I think we can trace it back to removing children from the home so that they don't see their dads anymore.
Sam Sorbo, thank you for everything that you're doing to empower parents to take responsibility for their children's education. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Say What on behalf of Protect Our Kids. That's all the time we have for today. But if you like this broadcast, please give us a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and be sure to visit our website at pok.org. And we'll see you on the next broadcast.